Iran has launched drones at Israel, and they will arrive in several hours. This is obviously an escalation of what looks to have been a growing conflict over the last few days. Iran has launched a salvo of drones at Israel, according to the Israeli military. They've made a statement. The Israeli military forces have said, we've prepared for diverse scenarios in advance. In order to intercept these launches, we have the circles of protection from both the Navy and the Air Force on several layers. These are live pictures from Israel that you're currently watching if you're watching us on GB News. The IDF go on to explain, that's Israel's defense forces, that the unmanned aircraft will take several hours to reach Israel and sirens will sound if any areas are under threat. They went on to say, we're going to try to prevent them from reaching Israeli territory. That is our task. He goes on to say, rather ominously, that if they do enter Israeli airspace, then you will hear sirens and alarms wherever these threats enter, and we will intercept them. That was a spokesperson from the IDF, Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari. So, folks, this is a very serious situation. It is an escalating situation. We're going to talk about Angela Rayner in just a moment, but I'm delighted to say that the guest we booked is the former editor of the Sunday Mirror, who has covered foreign stories extensively. Paul Connew, welcome to the show. Your reaction to this escalation between Iran and Israel, with Iran having sent drones to Israel?
On one level, it's not surprising that Iran's retaliating, but what is surprising, perhaps, is that they're doing it directly from Iran, aimed at Israel, rather than via proxies. And I think that is a surprise. And the interesting thing is going to be, interesting, I say, but dangerous, is how Israel responds. But of course, they've got a very, very sophisticated steel dome system, and how many of these drones get through is open to question. But the next question is, how does Israel react? Does it launch a major counterattack? Would it attack Iran directly? And how will America play this, depending on the scale of the Iranian attack and how many, if any, get through and hit targets within Israel?
Well, indeed, of course, Israel's focus has been Hamas since the October the 7th attacks, almost 6 months ago to the day. But, of course, this is a much more significant player in geopolitical terms, Iran, who are certainly hopeful of developing nuclear weapons at some point. A long-standing foe of the West, of the United States, of the United Kingdom. Could Britain and America get dragged into some kind of conflict here, Paul?
That's quite possible, although the Israelis are pretty well equipped, and I think President Biden would be reluctant, unless this attack starts to get through and cause casualties and damage in Israel. I think he will be issuing condemnation rather than the American fleet, which is in the Red Sea area, launching any attacks on Iran. But I think a lot of analysts were expecting Iran to continue using its proxies, with not a direct attack itself. But I wasn't that surprised, because the humiliation for Iran, in a way, of their consulate being attacked in a different country, and almost certainly by Israel, although Israel has never officially owned up to it. There's no doubt that it was Israel, and killing two very senior generals. It would be a humiliation, for the Iranian public. So it's no surprise that Iran had to react, but doing it directly is the surprise element.
Paul Connew, former editor of the Sunday Mirror, please stay with us. Let's now speak to the Evening Standard's defence editor, Robert Fox. Robert, your reaction to this shocking development in the Middle East, if you're just joining us on the radio or on television, let me bring you up to speed. Iran has launched drones at Israel, which are expected to arrive in several hours. The Israeli military has said we've prepared for diverse scenarios in advance. If these drones reach Israeli territory, sirens will sound and the drones will be destroyed. Robert Fox, your reaction?
Yes, it's quite a surprise that they have launched a drone attack from Iran. This is what the IDF, the Israel Defense Force, is saying, because it does give a long lead time. The real another scenario would be if behind this they launch ballistic missiles, because then the travel time is just a matter of a few minutes. And there has been some question whether you have a combination of drone and missile as whether they could overwhelm the radars of the aerial defenses of the Iron Dome system. Doing it this way, by giving notice, as we heard from the previous speaker, it's high risk for Iran. But to answer a point that has just been raised, I think the proxies are not very keen to get involved in this one on behalf of Iran. Iran has been egging on its pals in the Hezbollah of Lebanon to go on, and they've been launching hundreds of rockets. Rockets are very different, both from drones and from missiles, and they don't want to seem to go much further. In other words, Hezbollah in South Lebanon, and they've had plenty of experience of this, do not want an all-out war with Israel. So this is a problem, and it's very funny. Yes, it is revenge for the attack on the Damascus consulate on the 1st of April, but it's a very high risk. And as I was saying on GBNews earlier today, there's a bit of an indication that Iran is overstretched, because it now appears to be picking fights or involved in wars and conflicts on 5 different fronts. And we have to see what is going to happen. If one of these explosive drones gets through and hits a major target in Israel, then we are in a completely different ballgame, because America will come in.
And how might that manifest itself, Robert Fox, America's involvement?
I think that they will organize attacks on Iranian targets. And I don't think it'll be a land invasion, but I don't rule out some strategic target inside Iran being taken out by a joint Israeli-American operation.
Briefly, Robert, before I come back to Paul Connew, do Iran have nuclear weapons?
They sort of do, but they're not really highly developed. They're not in a position to prosecute a war, because if they went anywhere near that, I mean, it's only a handful of warheads. If they have that, the retribution would be enormous. And by the way, in doing that, they play into Benjamin Netanyahu's hands, because there's always been a suspicion that for years that he has wanted to engage America in a real strike on Iran before it becomes an effective nuclear military power.
Paul Connew, former editor of the Sunday Mirror, political broadcaster and writer. Can I ask you, what do you think Iran's goals are here with this strike? If you're just joining us, Iran have sent drones to Israel, which the IDF, the Israeli forces, have said they will shoot down. What are Iran playing at? Does it go beyond revenge?
I think at this stage it's as much about domestic politics in Iran, because to be seen to do nothing would obviously enrage the Iranian public. Plus, it would also give some power, to those who oppose the brutal, repressive Iranian regime. But Robert made the strong point that they do have ballistic missiles, non-nuclear ballistic missiles, and if they do follow the drones with those, and that takes it up to an even higher level. My gut feeling is that they won't go that far, but you never know. But picking up again for another point of Robert's, I think Netanyahu, in a sense, as long as these drones don't cause any major casualties in Israel, will be quite pleased in a way, because A, he thinks it'll bring America more strongly on the side, as opposed to the not particularly muted criticism that we've had from President Biden. And also, of course, there's another big domestic crisis in Israel, where Netanyahu, I'm a big supporter of Israel, but not of Netanyahu, I think, is a disaster. And the scale of the response to the appalling Hamas terrorist massacre of innocent Israeli citizens, but no one can call that anything but horrendous and disgusting. And Israel was entitled to respond. But the scale of the response and retribution in terms of civilian carnage is horrific, and almost certainly does constitute a crime against international humanitarian law. And therefore Netanyahu was basically clinging to the leadership even before October the 7th. The failures of Israel's much vaunted defense system in allowing October the 7th to actually happen further undermine his leadership. And he's only clinging on now because the nation, in a sense, always rallies if you're attacked or in a war situation. The temptation or the inclination is to pull together. But that's starting to crumble now. The protests against Netanyahu are gathering pace. And don't forget that before October the 7th, this was a leader facing corruption charges, and many of the reservists who are now fighting in Gaza were at one point before October the 7th were talking about refusing to sign up, as it were, because of Netanyahu's attempt to undermine the Israeli judicial system and its independence.
Okay. Paul Connew, thank you so much. Robert Fox, thank you so much.